On Alaska. The last frontier, Jane and Atz Lee Kilcher always came across as the rock-solid couple of the wild. They had the rugged romance, the teamwork, and that on-screen chemistry that made fans believe they were living their dream life off the grid. But behind those perfect-looking hunting trips and cozy cabin scenes, Jane was holding on to secrets that would eventually spill out. And when she finally confessed everything about Atz Lee, it painted a very different picture. So what did Jane say about Atz Lee? Join us as we get into all the juicy details. Backstory on Alaska. The last frontier. Jane Kilcher's confession about Atz Lee didn't just shake fans, it sent shock through the entire Alaska, the last frontier fandom. For over a decade, viewers had been watching the Kilchers live what looked like the ultimate off-grid dream. Hunting, fishing, farming, and surviving the brutal Alaskan winters without modern luxuries. It was the kind of rugged lifestyle that had people glued to their screens. But before we get into the details of what Jane finally revealed about Atz Lee, let's step back and look at the world where their story played out. Alaska, The Last Frontier, premiered on the Discovery Channel on December 29, 2011, and ran until November 13, 2022, spanning 11 seasons. It followed the extended Kilcher family, descendants of Swiss immigrants and Alaskan pioneers, Yule and Ruth Kilcher, living on their sprawling homestead just 11 miles outside of Homer, Alaska. The Kilchers had made a conscious choice to live without modern heating, relying instead on farming, hunting, and intense preparation to survive the long, punishing winters. The family's roots run deep in Alaskan soil, but their name also rings a bell in the music world. Singer Jewel is part of this clan, with Atz Kilcher being her father. She even appeared on the show from time to time, adding another layer of interest for fans. Filming took place year-round, capturing the real highs and lows of frontier life, while the production crew operated out of California. And through it all, Jane and Atz Lee were front and center, appearing to be one of the most solid couples on reality TV until Jane decided to tell her side of the story. Jane and Atz Lee's beautiful love story. On Alaska, The Last Frontier, Atz Lee and Jane Kilcher weren't just another couple toughing it out in the middle of nowhere. They were the couple fans couldn't get enough of. They had the survival skills, the banter, the teamwork, and that chemistry that made you believe they were living the dream in the wild. Every scene of them hauling in a big fishing catch, tracking game through the snow, or working side by side on the homestead felt like reality TV gold. But, as with most reality show love stories, what you saw on screen wasn't the whole story. Off-camera, their relationship was tested by far more than icy winters and food shortages. There were past divorces. There were near-fatal accidents. There were vicious online trolls who seemed determined to tear them down. And then, there were the constant rumors of splits, fights, and trouble that never seemed to die down. Their connection actually began long before any camera crews showed up in Homer. Atz Lee and Jane first crossed paths when they were just kids. He was 12, she was 11. At the time, Jane was living in Anchorage with her family, but they eventually moved back to Homer, the place both would always call home. They lived close enough to bump into each other, but the spark wasn't there yet. That would come much later, after both had taken very different paths in life. Jane's life was rooted in the sea. She was a commercial fisherwoman, just like her family before her, working in a demanding, male-dominated trade where the weather was brutal, the hours long, and toughness was non-negotiable. Atz Lee, meanwhile, had spent years away from the homestead, chasing music across the country with his guitar in hand. He played shows, explored new places, and lived life on the move before finally returning to Alaska, building his own cabin, and sinking back into the frontier lifestyle. Both had already lived through marriages that didn't last. Jane married Alaskan native Dikran Kasuni, and in 2003, they welcomed their daughter, Piper. Atz Lee's first marriage was to Nantia Krisintu, an MBA graduate he met when she visited Homer for work. They had their son, Etienne, in 2001 before going their separate ways. When Atz Lee and Jane found their way back into each other's lives, music was what tied them together. They reconnected over their love for it, especially one of Atz Lee's harmonica songs, and this time, something clicked. Romance bloomed quickly between the two, and on November 7, 2006, they made it official, tying the knot and moving into the Kilcher homestead, fully embracing the family's off-grid way of life. From the start, Atz Lee took the lead in hunting and gathering enough food to last through the bone-chilling winters, when fresh resources were almost impossible to come by. Jane shifted from commercial fishing to homestead survival, putting her skills into action by fishing for the family, hunting alongside her husband, helping build their cabin, and even riding horses to get around the rugged terrain. It was a hard life, but one they chose together. Despite the constant work and the harsh conditions, they made a point of keeping their relationship strong. In 2019, they hit some big milestones and shared them openly with fans. When Jane turned 45 that September, Atz Lee posted a tribute on Instagram, calling her his lovely lady pants, and joking that he looked forward to being her personal pack mule for many more years. A week later, on their anniversary, Jane returned the love with a throwback photo from one of their ice fishing trips, wishing him a happy anniversary. They also made one thing very clear early on. They were going to protect their kids from the glare of reality TV. Atz Lee's son, Etienne, and Jane's daughter, Piper, were rarely seen on the show. It wasn't about keeping them a secret. It was about shielding them from the cruel side of fame, especially the online harassment that can follow reality stars. Still, even with all the happy moments and united fronts, the pressures of life both in the wild and in the public eye took their toll. After 11 seasons of Alaska, The Last Frontier, fans couldn't help but wonder, after everything they'd been through, were Atz Lee and Jane still going strong? Or had the cracks in their off-grid paradise finally started to show? Well, that's where the story takes a turn. Because before they were the homestead's most watched couple, they weren't Atz Lee and Jane, the Kilchers, at all. They were two separate people with entirely different lives, different ambitions, and, yes, different spouses. And those relationships? They weren't just footnotes in their history. They were the winding roads, detours, and dead ends that shaped the people they became. Which brings us to the question you didn't even realize you needed answered. Who were Jane and Atz Lee before they found each other? And what exactly happened in those past lives that set the stage for one of Alaska's most talked about love stories? Who are Jane and Atz Lee's previous spouses? Before Jane and Atz Lee Kilcher ever became the wilderness power couple of Alaska, The Last Frontier, they each had a life and a marriage of their own. And those past relationships? They tell you a lot about the paths that led them to each other. Let's start with Nantia Crisintu, the woman Atz Lee was married to before Jane. Nantia's story is nothing short of global. Born on July 24, 1976, in Colorado to Sanit and Carol Crisintu, she spent her early years hopping between countries, Japan, then Borneo, before returning to the United States at the age of 15. She was already an overachiever, graduating from Choate Rosemary Hall at just 16. From there, her education turned into a full-on marathon. The Art Institute of Seattle, Maryland University of Integrative Health, and the University of Alaska Anchorage all made it onto her resume. Eventually, she capped it off with an MBA. She met Atz Lee in 1997 during a work trip to Homer, Alaska, a meeting that would eventually change the course of both their lives. They married sometime in the late 1990s or early 2000s, and in May 2001, they welcomed their son, Etienne Kilcher. But while the love was there, their lifestyles were worlds apart. Nantia had ambitions in public administration, a career track grounded in structure and long-term planning. Atz Lee? He was drawn to the unpredictable rhythm of life off the land, the challenge of living as a full-time homesteader. The difference in goals and lifestyles eventually became too big to bridge, and the marriage ended after just a few years. Since the divorce, Nantia has opted for a life away from the public. She hasn't popped up in interviews, reality TV cameos, or social media drama. Instead, she's focused on her career and raising Etienne. She's also kept things respectful and drama-free with both Atz Lee and Jane, maintaining a cordial relationship for the sake of their son. No interference, no trouble, just quiet co-parenting. Jane's first marriage tells a similar story of two lives that eventually diverged. Before she became Mrs. Kilcher, Jane was married to an Alaskan native named Dikran Kasuni. Born in May 1964, Dikran is now 59 and a resident of Seldovia, Alaska. During their marriage, Jane and Dikran welcomed a daughter, Piper Isolde Kasuni, on June 4, 2003. But like Atz Lee's first marriage, theirs didn't last. The details of why they split have never been made public. Some whispers point to compatibility issues or personal differences, but Jane has never spoken about it openly, and Dikran hasn't either. What's clear is that both of them have kept things private and respectful in the years since. Dikran has stayed out of the media, kept his personal life under wraps, and focused on his career and his daughter Piper. Much like Nantia, Dikran has kept his relationship with Jane and Atz Lee amicable for the sake of their child. No public feuds, no messy drama, just a quiet, working co-parenting arrangement. So, before the cameras rolled on Alaska, the last frontier, both Jane and Atz Lee had already lived through love, marriage, and the hard truth that sometimes two people just aren't built for the same life. Those past chapters didn't just fade away, they shaped the people they would become and set the stage for the relationship that fans would later watch unfold on screen. And when you look at the life they've built together now, you can't help but wonder, did those early lessons make them stronger? Or were they just the beginning of the tests to come? Because before Jane became the firecracker everyone knows today, she was just Christina Jane Furman. Background on Jane Kilcher. Jane Kilcher might be best known to the world as the fearless, quick-witted, and tough-as-nails star of Alaska, The Last Frontier. But her story starts long before reality TV cameras ever showed up in Homer, Alaska. Born Christina Jane Furman on September 14, 1974, in Homer, she was raised with the kind of self-reliance that would later make her a natural fit for life on the Kilcher homestead. Her parents, Bob and Sarah Furman, raised her alongside her two siblings, Bobby and Jessica. Her father, originally from Texas, passed down more than just a love for the outdoors. He taught her how to fish, a skill that would become her bread and butter, and, later, her claim to fame. When Jane was 12, her family moved back to Homer for good. She went through junior high and high school there, and it was during this time she first crossed paths with the Kilcher family. The homestead wasn't far from where she lived, and even then, she got a glimpse of the frontier life that would one day become her own. Before she ever became a familiar face on millions of TV screens, Jane was out on the water, earning her keep as a commercial fisherwoman. The work was grueling. Storms, freezing waters, and long hours, surrounded almost entirely by men, toughened her up in ways few jobs could. She didn't just learn how to catch fish. She learned how to survive in some of the harshest conditions Alaska could throw at her. Then came 2011, the year Jane officially joined the cast of Alaska, The Last Frontier on the Discovery Channel. The series documented the daily lives of the extended Kilcher family as they farmed, hunted, fished, and prepared for the unforgiving Alaskan winters, all without the conveniences most people take for granted. Jane's transition from commercial fishing to full-time homesteading was seamless, and her fishing expertise quickly became one of the family's biggest assets. Viewers loved her not just for her skills, but for her personality. She had this unfiltered, sharp sense of humor, a knack for tackling even the roughest jobs, and a real partnership with her husband, Atz Lee Kilcher, that made for compelling television. Whether they were hauling in massive salmon, braving icy rivers, or working together to prep for the winter, Jane and Atz Lee's dynamic kept audiences hooked. The show's success only grew, running for multiple seasons and pulling in viewers from around the world. Jane became a fan favorite, the kind of reality star people felt like they knew personally. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving, all while showing a deep respect for nature and the traditional ways of living that her family embraced. By 2024, Jane's hard work had paid off in more ways than one. Her estimated net worth was around $2 million, thanks largely to her appearances on the show, where cast members reportedly earned between $7,000 and $10,000 per episode. On top of that, the Kilcher family's real estate holdings in the greater Homer area were valued at more than $3.6 million, with the homestead itself worth about $800,000. Even with her reality TV fame, Jane has remained fiercely protective of her family's privacy, especially when it comes to her children. She's always made it a priority to shield them from the harsher side of public life, steering clear of exposing them to the constant scrutiny and criticism that can come with fame. While she doesn't make a big show of her charitable work, Jane's lifestyle speaks for itself. By living sustainably, using traditional methods, and respecting the land she calls home, she's become an unintentional advocate for environmental consciousness. For many fans, watching her live off the grid is more than entertainment. It's inspiration to rethink their own relationship with the earth. In the end, Jane Kilcher is more than just a TV personality. She's a fisherwoman, a homesteader, a mother, and someone who's built a life rooted in tradition and a love for Alaska's wild beauty. And whether she's hauling in fish, chopping wood, or keeping family life behind closed doors, she's proven one thing over and over. Jane plays by her own rules, and that's exactly why people can't get enough of her. But here's the thing about life in the wild. It doesn't just test your survival skills, it tests your relationships, the cracks in the marriage. For years, Atz Lee and Jane Kilcher seemed untouchable, the ride-or-die couple who could weather Alaska's brutal winters, back-breaking work, and even reality TV's invasive spotlight. 16 years together, side by side on the 600-acre Kilcher homestead, building their own cabin, living off the land, hunting, fishing, farming, and trading, they were the poster couple for Alaska, the last frontier. They even shared a love for music, often strumming and singing together or with family. But in July 2023, Jane dropped a bombshell on Facebook. Atz Lee wanted a divorce. Just like that. No long-winded explanation, no tell-all, just a raw, gut-punch confession that left fans stunned. Here we go. Atz Lee is divorcing me, and it is very unfortunate, but I cannot control it. Lost my best friend, and it hurts. But I guess that is life. It won't stop me. The announcement hit like a sledgehammer. Viewers had watched Jane trade in her fishing career for the Kilcher lifestyle, a move that seemed like it had paid off. After all, the Kilchers weren't struggling homesteaders scraping by. They were sitting on a piece of history. Atz Lee's father, the late Yule Kilcher, was a Swiss immigrant who carved out the homestead 80 years ago and even served in the Alaska State Senate. The land was worth millions. On paper, life looked golden, but the cracks weren't new. Back in 2015, Atz Lee's near-fatal hiking accident changed everything. An experienced outdoorsman, he fell off a cliff, breaking 26 bones and puncturing both lungs. The Discovery cameras captured his grueling recovery, but not everyone liked what they saw. Some viewers felt it was too invasive. Behind the scenes, Jane was suddenly carrying the weight of everything, providing for the homestead, running the household, and caring for her injured husband. The divorce rumors started right there. Jane shut them down hard at the time. She made it clear they were still committed to each other. And in 2016, they even renewed their vows in a romantic ceremony that felt like a happy ending. But as 2023 proved, it wasn't the forever fans had hoped for. Things got messier when Jane appeared on camera with a black eye. Cue the social media storm. Whispers and accusations flew fast, and some people were quick to pin it on marital trouble. Jane wasn't having it. On July 29th, she set the record straight. "This is not okay. This black eye happened on TV when I got scoped. I have nothing bad to say about Atz Lee. And leave my kids alone. My girl isn't and hasn't been a part of reality TV. And the facts are not even straight when y'all go after her. Leave all my family alone and come after me." For a moment, fans thought maybe, just maybe, the two could work it out. But by November 1st, 2023, Jane put that fantasy to rest. She posted a selfie with the caption, "Single," signaling that the marriage was truly over and she was ready to move on. And move on she did. Jane joined another Discovery show, Bearing Sea Gold, as part of Team Emily, braving the freezing, dangerous waters in search of gold. The online critics came for her, body-shaming, questioning her decisions, but Jane met them with the same mix of humor, grit, and unapologetic confidence that's always been her trademark. Atz Lee? Silent. No tell-all, no social media drama. He's still living on the homestead, still part of Alaska, the last frontier, and as far as anyone knows, keeping his private life locked down. In the end, Jane's divorce wasn't just another piece of reality TV drama. It was a reminder that even the toughest couples in the wild aren't bulletproof. But if there's one thing clear, it's this. Jane Kilcher isn't just surviving without Atz Lee, she's thriving. And while she was finding her footing in new waters, Atz Lee was facing a very different kind of battle, one that would land him in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. Atz Lee's lawsuit. Atz Lee Kilcher has been a staple of Alaska. The last frontier since the very first episode aired in 2011, pulling viewers deep into the danger and beauty of living entirely off the land. But in 2015, fans were hit with news that nearly ended his time on the show and his life. While hiking in Otter Cove near Homer, Alaska, the then 41-year-old suffered a devastating fall off a cliff. Jane, his wife at the time, broke the news on Facebook with a post that made hearts sink. Atz Lee Kilcher, an experienced hiker, suffered a terrible fall when hiking in Otter Cove. The accident was no scraped knee. Atz broke 26 bones, punctured both lungs, and found himself facing a recovery that would test every ounce of his stubborn Kilcher grit. When he was finally able to, Atz took to Instagram to let everyone know he was still standing. Well, mostly. Thankful to be alive and at home with my wonderful family. My broken bones are healing nicely, considering how many I broke. Lungs are holding strong, and every day I feel a little stronger. He posted raw hospital bed shots, and even his x-rays, metal plates and all, calling his healing slow but steady by his own measure, though doctors insisted he was ahead of schedule. His goal? To one day run and jump from Mountaintop Sagan. And in classic Atz Lee fashion, he threw in a nod to patience being his friend, thanking fans for the flood of prayers and well wishes. The Discovery cameras didn't shy away, chronicling his painstaking road back. A year later, Atz was still deeply grateful. Grateful to be walking, grateful for family, and grateful just to breathe. But 2 years after the fall, gratitude gave way to legal action. In a move that stirred plenty of conversation, Atz filed a lawsuit against Otter Cove Resort, seeking $100,000 in damages. His claim? The resort had failed to warn guests or take adequate safety measures to prevent a fall like his. The legal paperwork spelt it out plainly. They failed to adequately warn of and/or provide measures to prevent guests and other individuals from falling over the precipice at the resort. The resort's response was as sharp as an Alaskan wind. Total denial. They claimed zero responsibility or negligence, arguing that if Atz was indeed hiking on their property when he fell, it was entirely due to his own neglect, and not their fault in the slightest. It was the kind of saga that reminded everyone. Life on the frontier might be wild, but even the wildest lives can get tangled in courtrooms just as easily as in bear traps. The scandals and controversies. Back in 2014, the self-reliant image of Alaska, the last frontier, took a hit when a black bear hunt turned into a courtroom drama. A production company and two of the show's stars, Atz Lee Kilcher and Christina Jane Kilcher, each found themselves facing a single misdemeanor charge. The accusation? Using a helicopter to hunt black bear, something Alaska law has zero patience for. Court documents from the Kenai District Attorney's Office laid it out clearly. This wasn't just a quick lift to a hunting spot. This was a direct violation of the state's rule book. No helicopters in the pursuit, transport, or retrieval of game. Period. No exceptions unless it's a rescue. And this wasn't a rescue. Wilma TV Inc., an arm of Discovery Studios, was named right alongside the Kilchers in the charge sheets filed on July 13th. The company had allegedly facilitated transportation by helicopter for the couple to go on a bear hunt for the show. The hunt reportedly happened on or about September 19, 2014, near Homer, Alaska. And yes, it was all for the cameras. The way the tip-off came in sounds like something out of a reality TV subplot. Someone from the production team apparently decided to spill, flagging the Alaska State Troopers about the hunt. And when the footage aired, the evidence was right there on screen. The troopers didn't have to guess. They just hit play and watched it unfold. While the helicopter company that provided the ride walked away without charges, the Kilchers and Wilma TV weren't so lucky. The couple stayed silent publicly, ignoring press calls, while Discovery's communications director refused to confirm whether the controversial footage ever made the cut. Fast forward to the courtroom outcomes. Wilma TV ended up slapped with a $17,500 fine. The charges against Atz Lee and Jane? Dismissed in 2016, reportedly after the two agreed to testify against the production company. On paper, they were clear, but the whispers from the ordeal never really went away. And then came 2024, a year Jane Kilcher would probably like to erase from memory. It started with heartbreak. She announced to fans of Alaska, the last frontier and Bering Sea Gold, that her marriage to Atz Lee was over. No soft, vague PR statement, just the truth. They were done. But if she thought that honesty would earn her grace from the public, she was in for a rude awakening. The trolls came hard, and not the cute fairy tale kind. Strangers, many hiding behind fake profiles, attacked her looks, her body, and her worth. Jane had always had a backbone when it came to clapbacks, but this time, the venom was personal. It wasn't her first rodeo with online hate. Just the year before, she'd ripped into body shamers and trolls in a now famous Facebook post. She'd pointed out the obvious double standard. Women on reality TV, especially in rugged, male-dominated shows, get scrutinized for every pound, wrinkle, and outfit choice. The men? They walk around unbothered. She wasn't wrong. She'd also battled keyboard warriors over something as absurd as a rifle scope accident. The moment the scope hit her in the eye and left a bruise, Atz Lee's reaction was criticized to death by viewers who seemed to forget they were judging a highly edited snippet of reality. Jane's message back then had been crystal clear. TV doesn't show the whole truth, so stop acting like it does. But 2024 brought a new wave of nastiness. On January 10th, she went public again, calling out not just the body shamers, but also the impersonators running fake accounts under her name. Her frustration was raw. She made it clear that being a public figure didn't mean she'd signed up for round-the-clock harassment or violations of her privacy. The fake profiles blocked her from commenting, leaving her powerless to shut down the imposters. She raged about how trolls were bullies, the kind who steal personal pictures and post them without consent. And she wasn't done. She addressed the absurd, never-ending debates about her weight, her usefulness, and her looks. People argued over whether she was too thin or too fat, ugly or beautiful, worthless or valuable. And guess what? Nobody did that to the men on Alaska, the last frontier, or Bering Sea gold. She wasn't tiptoeing around the gender issue either. Most of the comments about her weight came from men, but the most vicious body shaming came from women. In her eyes, it was 2024. This nonsense should have died a long time ago. When it came to her divorce, Jane drew a hard line. The details between her and Atz Lee were private. Period. She called out the armchair analysts speculating on why the marriage ended, making it clear they were talking out of pure guesswork. Thankfully, not all voices in her comments were toxic. Plenty of fans rushed in with love and support. They called her graceful, artistic, hilarious, and inspiring. They reminded her that she was strong enough to live life on her own terms, and skilled enough to outwork most people watching from their couches. Some said she was the best kind of beautiful, beauty inside and out. Others told her she was one bad at woman and urged her to keep going no matter how loud the haters got. For every troll trying to drag her down, there was someone ready to lift her up. But one thing's for sure, whether it's standing trial for a helicopter hunt, standing up to body shamers, or standing on her own after a public divorce, Jane Kilcher doesn't just survive the storm. She talks right through it, stares it down, and dares it to keep coming. What do you think about Jane's clapback to her trolls? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.